Let's begin with a little background. We are in Professor Flitwick's wand class. The students are grouped together in pairs and learning how to levitate a feather. Harry and Seamus are finding it very difficult. They've swished and twirled and tapped, but the feather they're supposed to be sending skyward just lays flat on the table. Seamus got so impatient that he jabbed at it with his wand and set fire to it. Harry had to put it out with his shoe. Across the room, Ron and Hermione are paired up. Neither one is at all pleased. Ron was having a go at the feather. "Wingardium Leviosa!" he shouted, waving his long arms like a windmill. "Oh, you're saying it all wrong," Harry heard Hermione snap. "It's Wingardium Leviosa. Make the O nice and long." "Well, if you're so smart, then you do it then," snarled Ron. Hermione picked up her wand, twirled it a little, and said, "Wingardium Leviosa." With a flutter, the feather lifted off the desk, hovered a moment, and rose above their heads.
"Oh, yes, good show, Miss Granger,"
cried Professor Flitwick gleefully.
"Everyone, come over here and see this."
Ron's mood deteriorated over the next hour. "No surprise, nobody can stand her," he said to Harry as they made their way out the door and into the hallway.
"She's such a know-it-all."
Somebody then pushed past Harry and hurried forward. It was Hermione. As she shoved her way through the crowd, Harry could see that she was crying. "Uh-oh, she heard what you said there, Ron."
"Well, so what?"
said Ron. But Harry could tell that he felt bad about what he'd said. "It's pretty clear nobody much cares for her." Hermione wasn't seen for any more of the classes that afternoon. Later on, they headed down to join the Halloween feast in the Great Hall. They passed Parvati Patel as she talked to her friend Lavender, and she was saying that she saw Hermione crying in the girls' bathroom and that she wanted to be left alone. As Ron heard this, he looked even more uncomfortable. But then they made their way through the doors of the Great Hall. It had been fully decorated for Halloween, and Hermione was forgotten. Sorry, but here's another background break. During the banquet, there was an announcement that a troll had somehow entered the castle grounds and was inside the building. Now, this was very serious. The students were to be immediately hustled out of the hall and returned to their dormitories. On their way out, Harry and Ron passed groups of students hurrying in different directions. As they jostled their way along a crowded stairway, Harry suddenly turned and grabbed Ron's arm. "I just remembered. Hermione, what do you mean?" "She hasn't heard the news about the troll." They veered away from the other students and headed into an empty hallway. The emptiness was eerie. They crept along, trying not to make a sound. "Wait," said Ron. "Do you smell that?" Harry turned slightly, and the stench became obvious. A mix of old gym shorts and an abandoned communal toilet. And then something stopped them. They listened intently. A rasping kind of breathing and the shuffling sound of huge feet moving over the floor. Up ahead they could sense something coming closer to them. Something massive. They silently blended into a darkened little nook as the thing turned the corner and stepped into the moonlit passage. It was incredibly huge. It moved on short, thick legs, as big as tree stumps. Its ugly, bald head sat atop great, lumpy shoulders like a cannonball on a stack of boulders. And the stench it gave off almost made the air ripple in protest. It dragged a wooden club behind it, like the tail of a dead alligator. Then the troll lifted the club and stopped. It stood, peering around, listening. After a moment or two, it decided to turn around, and after one last look up the corridor, it moved off. Very slowly, Harry and Ron followed after it, heading for the girls' bathroom down another hallway. Then their hearts froze. A desperate, piercing scream echoed through the hall. "Oh no, it's Hermione," said Ron, as the color drained from his already pale face. "She's still in there," Harry gasped. "Go!" they said together. This was not what either of them wanted to do, but neither one hesitated for a second. They both raced ahead toward the open door. Hermione was cowering against a far wall. The color was drained from her face, and she looked about ready to pass out. The troll was closing in on her, smashing mirrors, bashing sinks as it approached. Harry started banging one of the stall doors, trying to confuse it. Then he grabbed a broken faucet, hurled it against the opposite wall. The troll slowly turned away from Hermione and moved his head back and forth, searching for the source of the noise. He spotted Harry, and his beady little eyes glinted as he focused on a new target. He raised his club and lumbered toward Harry. Ron was on the other side of the room as the troll moved toward Harry. "Hey, dodo head!" he yelled as he picked up a piece of metal pipe and threw it hard. The pipe smacked into the troll's shoulder, but it just bounced off unnoticed. He heard Ron's yell, though, and now it turned its attention again, this time onto the new annoyance. Harry shot around it and ran to Hermione. "Hermione, we've got to run!" Harry was trying to pull her off the floor, but she was still too stunned to move. She was partially pinned under a sink, but she was making a huge effort to shake off the fear and move. Her eyes started to focus, and she was coming around, but at that moment, Harry could see that Ron was trapped. All of the yelling and banging was an overload for the troll's tiny brain, and it started going crazy. It swung the club furiously at everything in sight, roared at Ron, who had no way out, and closed in for the kill. Reacting instantly, without the slightest thought, Harry did something that was both amazingly brave and incredibly boneheaded. He ran full tilt, vaulted high onto its back, and somehow wrapped his arms onto the troll's neck from behind. The troll didn't seem to notice anything was clinging to its back. Harry was like a tick on a dog, but it did notice that something had been shoved deep into its nose. Harry had been gripping his wand tightly as he made the leap, and it was now jammed right up to the hilt into one of the troll's nostrils. The troll let out a yowl. It wrenched and twisted its body around and around as Harry tried not to be thrown off and pounded. But he could feel his hands losing their grip, and the next second would be his last. Ron was screaming at the troll. He yanked out his wand, and some kind of spell popped out of his mouth. "Wingardium Leviosa!" The troll was startled to find its hand was suddenly empty. It blinked at its fingers in surprise. It looked up and saw the club was rising, up and up toward the high ceiling. Then it just dropped, landing with a hollow thud onto the bald head below it. The troll stiffened, tipped, and crashed face down onto the floor like a fallen tree. Hermione staggered over and sunk down near, but not too close, to the downed troll. She looked over at Ron, who was still holding his wand out in front of him, stunned at what had happened. Harry was on the floor, gasping and shaking. "Is it still alive?" she asked, to no one in particular. "It's still breathing," said Harry. He watched his wand moving up and down inside the troll's nose. He carefully reached down and slid his wand out. Gray-green goo dripped onto the floor. I'm going to have nightmares about this. Ugh, troll boogers. He tried to salvage his wand by wiping it on the troll's backside. Then they heard running footsteps and approaching voices. They all looked up, startled. Well, obviously, with all the roaring and screaming and crashing going on, somebody down below would have heard and figured out what was happening. The door opened, and Professors McGonagall and Snape charged into the room. It was Professor McGonagall who took command. She looked Ron and Harry over with a cold, critical eye. Her eyes bored into Harry with increasing anger. She drew in a long breath, and Harry wondered if she would breathe it out with fire. So much for winning 50 points for Gryffindor, he thought.
Whatever in this wide world were you two thinking?
Harry wondered how cold fury could feel so hot. He glanced over at Ron, who still had his wand out.
I am amazed that you are still alive. You have 2 seconds to tell me exactly why you are not in your dormitory.
Please, Professor McGonagall. They were looking for me. A small voice came out from across the room.
Miss Granger?
Hermione had managed to get to her feet at last. I heard there was a troll loose, and I wanted everyone to be proud of me. I've been reading all about them, and I thought I could handle it by myself. Ron's wand finally dropped. Here, right in front of him, was Hermione Granger, lying, straight-faced to a teacher. If they hadn't shown up when they did, I would have... She looked down at her feet. Were tears starting to flow, Harry wondered, as he listened to her story. When they got here, I was trapped. There just wasn't time to get anyone else here to help. Harry and Ron did their best to look as though this story was familiar to them.
I see. Well,
Professor McGonagall paused, stared at each of them in turn.
Miss Granger, I don't know what to say. I cannot possibly imagine how you thought you could take on a mountain troll single-handed. I am dumbfounded.
Harry was dumbfounded as well. Here was Hermione Granger, Miss Goody-Goody herself, pretending she had gone and broken some pretty big rules in order to help out Harry and Ron. What next? Would Snape start cracking jokes and yodeling?
You know, Miss Granger, that I am surprised at your behavior and extremely disappointed in your judgment. You don't appear to be hurt, so you are excused to go back to your house, and you can get something to eat. But I'll be taking 5 points from Gryffindor for your actions.
She then faced Harry and Ron.
And as for you two, I'll have to admit that not many first years could have taken on a full-grown mountain troll and come away to tell about it. You were very lucky to have pulled off that one. 5 points for Gryffindor for each of you. I'll inform the headmaster. Now, off you go.
They left as quickly as they could, staying silent all the way back up to the Gryffindor Tower. Lots of thoughts spinning in their heads, let alone the relief of letting their senses recover from the hideous smell of that troll. At last they arrived at the portrait of the fat lady.
"Password?"
she demanded. "Pig snout," and they ducked inside. They entered a jammed and rowdy common room as the Halloween festivities had continued on up here after the disruption from down below. The food had arrived and everyone was busy eating and visiting. Only one person was alone. She was standing by the door, waiting. The three of them stood there in embarrassed silence, waiting for someone to say something. Then they all muttered thanks and quickly departed toward the food. But that was the moment when everything changed. What was once 2 had now become 3. There are many ways the bonds of friendship are forged. Sharing a cookie, lending a hand, and let's just say that taking down a full-grown mountain troll is certainly one of them. This concludes our night bus tour number 1 of the Philosopher's Stone. If you have enjoyed this trip, now is the time to consider subscribing to this channel. There are several good reasons to do so. For one thing, it's free, and as far as I know, no one will pester you because you've joined. Also, by subscribing, I can let you know when the next tour is scheduled. And one more thing. Let me introduce you to our driver. Everyone, this is Ernie Prang. He has graciously consented to come out of retirement specifically to be our driver on this tour. I think it is appropriate to offer him a token of our thanks, don't you? 2 or 3 silver sickles should do nicely. What do you say to that, Ernie? Yep. Yes, well, there you have it. I couldn't have said it better myself. So if you would like to leave a little something in his cup, the means to do so is at the bottom of the page. And with that, I bid you all goodbye for now. Adios, amigos.